I am wonderful. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're back.
we are back and we're alone today.
We're alone and we're back. That might be a good or bad thing, but
I know we had Mike and Megan last week and just so many people tuned in to watch that and so many comments to us and Mike and Megan
hmm
about it. It was amazing and we are definitely going to have them back sometime soon.
yeah, they were so fun. But today I thought we would tackle a question that seems to be emerging in all different couples that I'm coming into contact with.
Oh, I know what it is.
Yeah.
Is it ever going to get warm? Because it was 0-ish last night here in Buffalo.
When I woke up this morning, it was -4, I think.
Yeah, and there was snow in Florida. One
Yeah.
of our friends is in Hilton Head in South Carolina, and he posted pictures of snow in the Carolinas, coastal Carolina, snow in Texas, Houston. We didn't get much snow here where we are because we're north of the city, but we were cold, wind chills of like -14.
But we did get some snow. Like, if it was a different area of the United States, it would have been considered a lot of snow.
Yeah, but also a tip I passed on to our couples groups and stuff was best thing to do when it's cold at night,
Hot chocolate?
cuddle.
Oh, cuddle. I'm just
Yes.
kidding.
And if you look at the buddy method, which has been long posted and documented and distributed, that the best way is naked. So it's a
Oh,
great time
okay.
to warm up with your spouse and cuddle up and enjoy the cold.
And not argue, because it's hard to argue naked.
That's true. I mean, we have a sign that says that right behind you. I know you're looking at the screen. The
Yeah.
key to a successful marriage is to
Argue naked because it's hard to do.
absolutely.
But no, sadly, that is not where, I mean, I'm not a meteorologist. I don't know when it'll warm up, and I'm not even good with keeping up with the weather.
True.
So, question is more along the lines of, well, first off, let me ask you this.
Okay.
Do you think that a person can change?
Yes.
Why?
If they want to. I think that's the big part that we miss. I think that a lot of times, like, especially in marriage, we'll be like, oh, I just wish they would change. God changed them. God changed them. Oh, I really wish you would change. If you just change, things would be different and all this other stuff. And the bad part, like, it's true, 100% true, but that also would be really easy if I said, Kristen, I got a list. Can you just go down through this list and, by tomorrow, I'll give you to the end of the week. Just change all these things and I'll be perfectly happy. How would that go over?
Well, first off, I don't think you actually would be perfectly happy. You'd probably have a new list.
True. But how would that go if I gave you that list? I'm like, hey, just check these off as you change them.
You already sometimes tell me things to change, and it doesn't go over well.
Yes, that's very true.
Not a list per se.
Mm-mm.
But you did actually just about hit on the question, why won't my spouse change? So I feel like that's a big area of frustration for a lot
Absolutely.
of people,
Yeah,
for so many reasons, and I thought we could dig into that tonight.
sure. I mean, I think that's good. And I think at different points in our relationship, it's something that all of us ask.
hmm
I think part of it is, let's just assume when you get married, you're not really following Christ. I mean, I know there are people who are, and they got saved at 5 and they've lived this perfect life. But now let's get real. For the most part, that's not where you are at the beginning of your marriage.
Or
Sometimes,
you get saved early, and then it's not your own faith, and you still
yes,
have to find your own faith. Not to say you're not believing or even following, but you might not have fully grasped it. Like, I think there's so many people
right.
on that continuum.
And I think the other part, when you get married and you bring two people together who are totally different,
Yeah.
many times instead of rising to the better, the more mature or whatever it is, you kind of slip towards the fun or the easy or the
The
whatever it
easy.
is. So I think that's a problem. So when you come into a marriage and that's where you are, like I said, it does not matter where you are. I mean, we do premarital, and there are some people who are right there. They're great. They own their faith, and they're ready to be married. Some younger, some older, depends on where you are. But for the most part, you are not 100% equal in your faith. You're
Right.
not
And
at the,
that's not just premarital, right? That like that's
yeah.
throughout.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And as you get married, as two people come together, even going through like 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, for the most part, you may be paralleling each other, but think of it more as like you're in a little race. Like one of
Hmm.
you's ahead, then the other one takes the lead, and the other one's ahead, and
Right.
one like it's there's not that many times when you're just riding side by side in your faith and where you are,
Hmm.
um, with what you do with your day, with how you view God exactly. Yeah, we view God the same way. Don't get me wrong, we really really do. But I read more. Um, to me, that's like a huge part of it. Like in the morning when I read my Bible, I do the devotions and stuff. That's where I am. You do it later in the day because it's easier for you. You're not awake. You've got stuff to do and everything like that. So even in that, even if we just look at our day, I'm starting up here in that aspect and you're starting back here. Now, there may be other things where you're starting up here and I'm starting back here. So we're never really running parallel, which kind of hurts the relationship, or it doesn't hurt the relationship. It's something we have to keep in perspective when it's like, man, if you just change this and we're right here where I am, things would be so much better and we'd be moving to here.
And I think you actually, in your description of the two of us, you made it very clear that you feel your way is superior.
Yeah.
And also, you think that I start out behind you, whereas I start out my day doing meditations.
mm-hmm,
And who's to say that that is behind you?
mm-hmm.
We're just in a different spot.
And I will say to that, like, I'm not saying my way is right and your way is wrong. Don't get me in that. But it's different. And it doesn't mean either one of us are wrong. There's people that wake up and they pray for an hour every morning. That's in my routine, but it's normally after I I read and stuff like that. And there's people that get up and meditate, and there's people that do these different things. Doesn't mean one's right or wrong. It's more that's right for me and this is right for you.
And like we talked about before in that season too, sometimes I mean like that'll ebb and flow. But getting back to that, so you believe right in the beginning that yes, people change because I do feel that I've heard people say that he will never change.
Mm-hmm.
Just give up because that will never change. You will never change him. And
That will,
maybe you will never change him might be more accurate.
yes.
But that person never changing isn't necessarily. And we've had there was sort of a funny saying that a young man didn't want to get married because he didn't want to give up many different women. And an older man said to him, don't worry, you'll be married to 50 different women by the time you reach age 50 or whatever.
Yeah.
Because your wife is always changing.
Yeah.
So that's like a very good example of how we do change.
Yeah, and I think you were really when you said that they say that I will never change you. I won't.
Mm-hmm.
There's I mean, I could force you to do things, I can coerce you to do things, but that's not a change. That's not something that tomorrow is going to be different or in a week, a month, a year. That's not it. We have to want to change,
Right.
and it's God who changes our wants. I think
Yeah.
that's the other part. It's not that, oh, you know what, I really want to do this. And there are people that, yeah, they really do, and they will work at it and stuff. But if there's not something in there, some innate thing in there that's drawing you to it, you're not going to do it. And I will add too, because we always say this: if you are in a relationship where there is any kind of abuse, addiction, or active affair, then you need to look at where you are
And
and
distance
pause
yourself.
and distance yourself from that. And
That's not to
those,
say that that person will never change at a different point in their life or God will never work and change them. But that doesn't mean that you have to put yourself through a destructive situation
yeah, or your kids or
while that
whatever
is
it is.
happening.
Like, and let me go into that a little bit further. If you are in one of those things, and you know what, if your husband or your wife, whatever it is, let's just say it's a physical abuse, if they hit you, say, you know what, I'm really sorry, I'll never do that again. They may have the best of intentions, but without some intervention from God, number one. but some help for them, that's probably a lie.
Right.
And
So you're saying like that quick fix,
yeah,
say whatever it is. There's
absolutely.
definitely a
Yeah, I'll
pattern,
never have a drink. I'll never do this.
right?
I'll never.
Where
That's
they
probably
do
not going
it,
to
they
happen.
get in trouble, they go through that, and then they become very apologetic, and that's a pattern. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have that want in their heart, but they're not there yet for you to say, okay, I'm going to do this again.
Yeah,
So,
and they need help, and you can be
mhm,
part of that help, but you're not the only help, and you need to realize that. Get help. Talk to a counselor. Get them
mhm,
to a counselor. If it's whatever, get them to rehab. Get them a pastor. Whatever it is, but get them to that next level of help there. Because as much as we want, as much as we hope, as much as we pray, as much as we whatever, we cannot change those things. They need some actual professional intervention to change those things.
right.
Now, on the other side, that's not to say that, you know what, there are people that change 100%. Like you can see night and day, you can see a change. That is not the majority. God can do
And that's
anything.
God, right?
Yes.
Like, that is not the person who's coming to you in the morning after waking up saying, I'm so sorry, I'm going to change. That is God doing a change in people's lives. So, not to discount that, but we're also not talking about those situations today.
Yeah. And I will say this, in all those situations, I think we know people who have been in every one of those
Hmm.
situations that have seen God intervene and
Yeah.
change, and their marriages are great today
Hmm.
and things like that. That's not always the case,
Hmm.
but we do know people that it have and have an incredible story to share with people who are going through those things. And if that is you, we'd love to talk to you, and and let you share your story, because there are people out there that need to hear these stories as well.
That is a really good point. We're definitely looking for other couples to share stories of overcoming.
Mm-hmm.
So, any area where you have overcome by the grace of God and by doing it God's way, um, come and share. We would love that. And,
Yeah,
our story, we have a lot of overcoming in too.
yeah.
Um,
And I think in different seasons there's been pretty much all of that stuff,
hmm.
and so we don't speak to this as someone who doesn't know or hasn't been through it.
Yeah, the hard
um,
stuff.
and we do understand it, and how hard it is. Some of that with each other, some of that with other people and stuff, but we do understand it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but yeah, I mean, that's it. And if you do have a story you'd like to share, if you would like to reach out to us, you can just email Kevin at marriageinthebuff.com
Hmm.
anytime. We'll get back to you. But other than that, the day to day, I think that's the bigger one. That's the one that like 90% of people deal with.
Yeah. So, like, going back to what you said, you've got someone who feels they're ahead
Hmm.
and someone who feels they aren't, or even that someone is feeling like another person has work to do,
Yeah.
right? So I know we've talked a lot about that, and I think that's a major frustration in a lot of people. And this might be to the point of that person, one of the two are not saved, but it also might be they're both saved, but they're still working things out. And
Yeah.
we're never going to be perfect until we reach heaven.
Yeah. And that's it. That a lot of times we have that fairy tale of, oh, we'll get married, we'll live happily ever after. Or, okay, well, that wasn't exactly how it worked, but wow, they found Jesus. Everything's going to change. We're going to live happily ever after. Or, I found Jesus. Everything's going to change. We're going to live happily ever after. Are you going to live happily ever after? Sure. Is it what we think is happy? Probably not. God
Is it
says
on
it's
our
going to be hard.
timeline?
It's going to be work. It's going to be pick up your cross,
Hmm.
die to yourself daily. Put other people, love God, love your neighbor. All these things that are not what we would consider happily ever after.
Or easy?
But eternally, we are happily ever after.
Yes. And many of us do have to walk through some of these struggles to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that might be there's like, I feel like there is an eternal reason for people to walk through struggles in their marriage, whether it is to suffer as Jesus suffered
Mm-hmm.
and to share in that suffering,
Mm-hmm.
or to help others in that same situation. You will have a story to tell. You can come on and tell the story of how God ultimately saved you, saved your spouse. So I think that's good. We will have struggles for a certain reason. And if you can sort of embrace that and look at that in a different way and say, God, show me how to love him through this.
Hmm.
Show me how you see him. Show me how to be the best wife I can be through this struggle, and be by my side and lean into God rather than doing the opposite and saying, I wish he was like this. God isn't there. He's not hearing my prayers, which I think is our natural bent.
Yeah. And I mean, if you just look back to the New Testament stuff, James, Jesus' brother, said, count it as good when you go through
Yeah.
these trials. And, of all of them, the disciples, the apostles, and stuff like that, so many of them died a painful death, but were so happy doing it because they knew the other side. So, and they went through, if you look at a person like Paul, who was tortured and all these other things, he kept just proclaiming, telling his story, telling what Jesus did in him and through him and stuff like that, and just sharing it and sharing it. And, that's what it's all about with us. It's also sharing our story. We look back in our 25 years, I mean, we've had good and we've had bad. And I tell you, the worst of the worst is probably our greatest story. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably the one that can help people the most. It's the ones that have drawn us closer to one another. It's the ones that have drawn us closer to God.
Mm-hmm.
Would I love to not have gone through those things? Absolutely. Would we be the people we are today if we didn't? Absolutely not.
Right, right. And God definitely has a plan for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think the day-to-day frustration is something that everyone can understand.
Yeah.
You have talked about that 1% change.
Yeah.
And as you are maturing in your walk, or maybe after you found God, or after you've come back and hey, I have been doing these things, or I've been treating people this way, or I have been living this life that is not God pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
How do I change? It's almost impossible to just shut it all one day, like you said before, and just change. Now, can that happen? Absolutely. Anything can happen with God, but is that how it will definitely happen? Is that the change?
No.
So, can you speak a little bit to that 1%, that little tiny increments?
In Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about that, the 1% change. Like, if we want to change everything in our life, we can't do it all at once. It just, I mean, we're not made to do that.
But
as humans, we cannot just change absolutely everything. And we can maybe for a day or two, a week or something like that.
Yeah.
But the reality is the old self will creep back in. So what he says is you do it in little pieces, 1% changes. So if you just look at a circle and, the top, 12 o'clock, you're going this way. And if you do just a 1 degree change, so say, you know what, you want to add prayer into your daily life. So you start for 5 minutes or 2 minutes. And then the next day you do 5 minutes and 6 minutes and 7 minutes and 8 minutes and 9 minutes. By the time you have gone 180 days, 180 degrees, 6 months, you have totally about faced.
Yeah.
And that's biblical too. When we think about it, it's like, what does it mean to repent? It means to turn from the things we were doing
And walk the other
on
direction.
about face
Yeah.
and walk the other direction. So, as easy as it is for us on the other side of it, if someone's struggling with something, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's porn, maybe it's the way they talk or whatever it is, for them to change everything and never look back, it's really, really hard. Now, we on the other side, we're very judgmental. It's like, oh, you changed, but look, you did this and you did this and you did this and you did this. That's why time is the ultimate tell of it, because you know what, we can't change it overnight. We may want to with all of our heart, and we can give it to God, and sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. But if we make those little changes every day, okay, if it's alcohol, I'm not going to a bar again. I'm not going to a liquor store again. You know what? There's friends. Why am I going to hang out with this friend?
Right.
I'm not going to this place. I'm not going to eat this because when I eat this, I really want to drink. I'm not going to be with this person. I'm not going to watch this. I'm not going to. But all of those changes in time equal what you're looking for. And I think that's how we have to look at it, especially in our relationships with our spouses. And it's really, really hard. And it's really hard when you're in a hard spot, when things are really bad. Because when you're in that spot and you do it, and it's like, all right, 1 degree, 1 degree, when you're that person, 1 degree. Well, I did this, I did this, I did this.
Hmm.
And then there's going to be somebody, whether it's your spouse, your kids, a friend, a family, someone who's looking in from the outside and says, they don't see any of those things you've
Those
done.
little
They just
one
see, oh no,
degrees.
you're still right here. You're
Right.
supposed to be here, but you're right here. Well, but I was here. And that's the thing. We have to, and as spouses in that situation, we have to look for those 1 degree changes. We have to look for those little things. It's like, well, you know what? He did this, but he didn't do this.
And I think that's really where I wanted you to go with that, because I think that we, with the best of intentions, want to have our spouse be the, let's say, be the leader in the family, or work on communicating, like when they come home, and have that open communication, or work on supporting whatever that thing is, that mountain that we're working on. They want that, and that's good. But the way that they come about doing it might actually sabotage
Mm-hmm.
those 1 degree changes that their spouse is doing.
Yeah, you need to be their cheerleader,
Yes.
not the one pointing out, oh, well, you're still doing this and you're doing that, and you need to, number one, give it to God. And the thing that you need to do, it's not, oh man, well, have Kristen change this. No, have Kristen encounter you. Number
Yeah,
one,
that's good.
and let me see her the way you see her. And then the really, really hard part, let me see myself the way you see me, because Kristen could be a horrible, horrible person, but so am I.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the spouse that does that, that has those best intentions and wants things to be from here to over here, is going to miss those tiny 1 degree
Yes,
changes. And then what ends up happening, and you've said that this has happened to you, by me, by other people, that picking on the things you haven't done sort of deflates all of the effort that you've been putting in.
absolutely. You just feel like you will not win. You just feel like, I've done this, 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 and this. I'm trying my hardest, but you don't even see it. And I think that's the other part. We need to name it and tell them, hey, we see this part. It might be a little
Yeah.
tiny thing, but we need to encourage them and say, you know what, I saw you did this. I appreciate it. I love you, and keep that moving, because it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you've got people that are just putting you down, that are just calling out everything you do, it doesn't matter who it is. You're not going to want to continue to do what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
You will get deflated, and you will quit putting the effort in. You will walk away. You will look somewhere else.
You
You'll
may
tune
have
it out.
sabotaged 5 degrees of change and go back 20,
Yeah.
like,
And that's it. The one step forward, two step back. Absolutely. And it's like, they may have made, it may have been 5 degrees, like you said, and they might go back 50, because they just, they're defeated, and they just feel like they're alone and they can't do it. And that's part of it. We are meant to do life together.
hmm
We are one. And if one of us wants nothing to do with the other one, if one of us is just trying to push the other one off, or shed the other one, or build a wall between the other one, we're not one.
right.
And the person on the other side of that, they're not going to want anything. They're not going to put in the work. They're not
Right.
going to care. And I think that's dangerous. We talk to people all the time about things like this. As people are married and it really doesn't, I'm not even going to say for longer, because there's people who have been married a year and fall into this
Sure, it
whole
doesn't.
thing.
Yeah.
But as a whole, where we see that as people who have been married, I don't know, there's that I want to say sweet spot, that bad spot, somewhere between 6 and 9 years,
hmm
that 7 year itch, or whatever you want to call it. That's real. That's when people, normally in a marriage, you come together. That first year, you're kind of learning each other, and then you're like, oh, this is kind of weird. Then you might have a baby, get pregnant, have a baby. You're going through kids and stuff like that, and then somewhere around there, that 6, 7, 8, 9 years, it's like, whoa, where am I?
Yeah.
Like, the guy's like, what am I doing? What am I getting? I go home. I've got kids. I got my wife who's frustrated and
Who
doing all
wants
this
me to
stuff, and
be
wants me
what
to do
she
all this
wants
stuff.
me? Yeah.
And then you've got the wife who has, like, given everything up and lost her identity and changed everything. And so you've got two people, and you're just growing apart.
And that's all about perspective. And if you don't work on it in those early years, you have danger of getting to that.
Yeah, and honestly, the longer your marriage goes, the further you can grow apart.
Hmm.
And there will come a time when you're just one of you, if not both, you're just like, well, what are we doing? I
Right.
don't even know you.
Yeah. So I think in all of that, that's a really good point that one of the two is going to want change
Hmm.
at some point. I think you did say it's not us that's going to change, or change the other person.
Hmm.
So as much as we can belittle them or we can pick out what's wrong, um, or even if we feel we're doing a great job at cheerleading, we also may not see as big a change as we feel like we should see. And I think in that case, we just really need to continue, whether it's some change, no change, whether you have a spouse that's not even saved, give it to God,
Yeah,
right? Like continuously,
and continue to give it to God.
yes, continuously give it to God, pray. And I was reading, and a verse came up today that I thought was perfect for this because I'm really thinking like it's about waiting for God's time.
Hmm. Which is
Whether,
not easy.
right, which is not easy. And we want things on our time. And I've heard people say, oh, I have been praying for my husband for 10 years. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But that is our faith
Hmm.
that we are losing. It is telling of how we view God,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's putting God in a box.
Yes.
So the verse I wanted to share, Psalm 27:14, wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Yes, wait for the Lord.
And that's hard. I mean, today in our society, we are an Amazon society where we want it now.
Yeah,
If we have to wait more than 2 days, is it worth the wait?
right.
I mean, we weigh that in our mind. If we're buying something, is it worth the wait? It's funny when you look back and think about this, depending on your age and stuff like that. If you were an adult pre-COVID,
Hmm.
and depending on where you lived and everything, but honestly, if you're an adult pre-COVID and you would go out on a date, you would go to dinner.
Hmm.
You would have to wait for a table a lot of the time. If you went to dinner on a Friday or Saturday night in a bigger place, in a good place,
Get
you were
on the
going to have to wait
list.
for, yeah, you had to wait.
There wasn't as much takeout.
No. But now when COVID came around, everything shut down and then things started to open up and then it was like takeout, takeout, takeout.
Hmm.
And then when everything opened back up, there was the signs of, oh, well, it's going to be longer. We don't have people, staffing, and all
Yeah.
this other stuff. And now, I don't think we ever rebounded that whole area or anything. And dining out can be a challenge just partly because of that. But let me tell you something. If I have to wait, I am very impatient. I didn't used to be. I remember you used to go on a Friday night. Hey, there's a half an hour wait. There's an hour wait. Remember you go to Outback and they'd be like feeding you bread and blooming onions in the line because it was an hour and a half long and stuff like that. Or things like that. And if
I
you
mean,
the older
also
you are, the more you
technology,
remember that.
you get a text where
Yeah.
before, remember before you
Yeah, you
wouldn't get
could.
it.
Yeah, you had that stupid thing that you could go basically outside, and then if you went any further, it wasn't gonna
Right. You
go
had to
off.
stay
So
there.
you had to stay there. Now you can go to a store, do whatever, somewhere nearby and stuff. But we are frustrated with the little bit of weight and stuff we have right now, and that's just the way we've changed our whole society. The Amazon things, like if I can't have it in 2 days or less, I really probably can find it somewhere else. It's going
Yeah.
to get it to me and
And
stuff
that's
like
a good
that.
analogy. The waiting with dinner, waiting with Amazon, like the cultural analogy,
Yeah.
because when you were just talking a little bit ago about changes, one, what was it, 1 degree doesn't
Hmm.
seem like a lot.
Yeah.
So that does seem like that's going to be a long wait.
Yeah.
And then when I read the verse of wait for God, you
Hmm.
said something else. Did you say, or did I hear you say something about his timing?
Yeah, his timing is nothing like ours. I mean, God, eternity is nothing.
Yeah, so
So
in
if we're talking about our lives, I mean, at best we're 80, 90. I mean, yeah, there's extremes. But if we say an average person lives 75 to 80 years,
well, when he changed it, he said 100 years. Remember, he
yeah.
was like,
But I'm just saying that's not even a blink of the eye
yeah,
to God.
Right. And I was also reading in Second Peter because I wanted to look this verse up because I knew when we talked about waiting that this would just come up because it actually gives me, I guess, depending on the time, anxiety or peace, depending on how I look at it. But 2 Peter 3:8-9, but do not forget this one thing, dear friends, with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years,
Hmm.
and 1,000 years are like a day. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promises,
Hmm.
as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. And when I look at that, I think now a little bit more about the couples that are waiting on their spouse to be saved, to be
Hmm.
repented. Not just the change, because we can apply that to that, but God doesn't want your spouse
Mm-mm. He wants you.
to perish.
Yeah, but
Like he wants you all. He wants all of
hmm
you. He wants a perfect marriage, however it started. He wants to redeem that. And he'll be patient and
hmm
he'll wait through whatever. So he's got this grand plan and he sees things 10, 20, 30 years down the line that
It,
you don't see. And you're just in the midst of that day to day, and it's hard.
yeah, and it is because there's two things there. God is omnipresent, so He's
Mm-hmm.
around when we're not. He
Mm-hmm.
sees our spouse.
Mm-hmm.
So when they go to work, when they go whatever, He's there.
Yeah.
And He's omniscient. He knows it all, which is the big piece that we don't. He knows what's going in their mind, what's going in their heart, the changes that are happening,
Mm-hmm.
the the 0.25 degree change that you're not going to notice or see for a while. He knows those things. So I think we need to take heart to that, that it's like so much that's like, you're not changing. I see you, what you're doing, but God knows it all and He sees it all.
Right.
And He can see the future. So He knows what's coming. And that's the part that we need to hold to. It's like, you know what? God is good.
Right.
God wants what's best for me. He wants what's best for my marriage. And He works all things
Okay.
for good. So it may not be something I can understand right now, but if I hold tight to God, to His promises, I know in the end, it's all good.
Yeah, that's good. And how do you act through that? Like, how would a spouse keep on being faithful and true to God's word while still supporting their unbelieving spouse?
I think number one, you got to be in God's Word. You got to surround yourself with
Hmm.
people who are positive influences. That's what we talk about: church, small groups, things like that. You, divorce runs in circles. If you've
Hmm.
got, oh, we got all my friends who are saying, oh, get rid of her, get rid of him. This one got divorced, this one got divorced, and then this one's kind of like dominoes falling. And if you're standing in that line, you're going to fall too.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful of who we have pouring into us.
Hmm.
I mean, there's lots of people that speak to me. There's not that many that speak into me. And
Right,
that's a
right.
big difference because, we go to work, we go to church, we go to these different places, we have friends, we have all the stuff. There's people speaking to you all day long. But the ones that speak into you, that's that smaller circle. That's
Yeah.
those ones that, you know what? And it's twofold. Number one, if you're going to speak into me, then, I mean, if it's a position of authority of something, that's one thing. But if you want to speak into me in my marriage, then you better know something about your marriage. And I better be able to see the fruit in your marriage.
Yeah.
That it's not like, oh, well, we got a divorce or this is horrible and I hate her and I'm talking about. No, no, no. You don't get
Right.
a right to speak into me.
I
And
mean, that's really good because without a doubt, you have to have those people who are pouring into you and giving you, because the most important person in your life isn't. Like you're
yep,
lacking that, right? So you
yep,
have to, but then I think also you have to make sure you are keeping things in priority.
yeah,
So I think putting God first, but
mm-hmm,
still putting your husband as the most important person in
yep,
your life. So, not having them feel that you think lower of them
yeah,
because they're not a believer, or that you are more superior, or that you are cutting them down, but living your faith out in a way that will attract them to Jesus instead of repel them, or instead of feeling like Jesus is coming between the two of you. but showing them a love. Like it says in the Bible that you can bring your spouse to
That's
Jesus.
what I was
So
just thinking.
how?
I can't remember what verse that is, but it talks about being unequally yoked, and
Hmm.
that and I think it was the wife, if your husband is not a believer, and
Hmm.
that you just live it out. You love them, you show them God's love, and this is how you do it. That's the change agent. It's not you, it's God, but it's God working through you in everything you do. It's the way you speak to them, it's the things you do for them, and things like that. And a lot of times it's not immediate. When you're talking about that, I thought about a couple things. I thought about the one book. It's one of the Jimmy Evans books. I don't remember which one it is. It may be Marriage on the Rock. But he's talking about when a couple came to him when they first started, and same thing, that the husband was cheating on his wife, and she knew it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
she
that, yeah.
stood by him. She would make
Hmm.
him dinner and stuff, and he's like, "What are you doing? You know what I'm doing. I want to divorce." And she just kept doing it, and he finally agreed to come into counseling, and he walked in with Jimmy, and he's like, "I just don't understand this. Like, how can she love me when I'm unlovable?
Right,
When I'm doing these things." But long story short, that's what got him. That's what saved him. That's what saved their marriage, was her actions. It wasn't her scolding him. It wasn't her calling these things out. It was her
right.
loving them.
Not nagging, not talking about him, not talking down about him to others.
Yeah, and I will add a note. We have a couple who we have known for probably close to 20 years, and the wife is not a believer, and
Mm.
it does not stop him from loving her.
Right.
um, like, it does not stop it. I can't say it doesn't change anything in their marriage, but he loves her, he prays for her, he goes out of his way to show his love each and every day.
Yeah.
um, and I it's been close to 20 years
Yeah.
that we have known them, and he's not giving up.
No, he's faithful. And I read, I think it was on Family Life's website
Hmm.
today. I was looking up that those verses I wanted, and this
Hmm.
popped up, and it was a story about a spouse who wasn't a believer
Hmm.
and became a believer. His wife was, and one of the things he said was, make your spouse the number one human being in your
Yep.
life. And then just one little part of it. There's a bunch, but he put, over time I saw her devotion to Christ actually reinforced her love for me
Hmm.
and made her want to strengthen our bond. And instead of ignoring me in favor of Christ, the church, and her Christian friends, she redoubled her efforts to be a caring, thoughtful spouse. I
Yes.
could see that I was still the most important person in her life, just as she was in mine. And in this story, obviously, it wasn't exactly like they married. Like, she found Jesus
Hmm.
before he did. And I think there's also a danger in that,
Hmm.
of making someone feel really uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And instead of that, you are like, I think the biggest thing to do is take that burden off of you. Like, it's not going to be us that makes our spouse believe. We're just going to obey and do what we're called to do. So, like, give that burden to God,
Hmm.
because He's the one who's going to work good things. And then follow what we're told to do. We're told to love God. We're told to love those closest to us. Our spouse is closest to us.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean hurting them.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing. And I never really thought about that. What we're going to talk about tonight. I'll just say this: this is all Kristen. I didn't. This is her discussion, her leading, her topic, her everything, and I'm just kind of talking it through as we go. We didn't talk about this before, but that is a huge thing, that there will be one or the other that somehow finds Christ, and things change. I mean, we all know that things change. Your heart changes. It changes from the inside out and stuff like that. And there's a risk of that when that happens. It's like, you know what? I'm headed this way, and they're headed this way, and that's okay. And we just keep working towards that. But that's not the way it works. That's not the way it's meant to work. The
Mm-hmm.
law of priority, which is exactly what you said. It's God, your spouse, your kids, and then everything else will fall into place. Um, and with that, I mean, Jesus said it: love God, love your neighbor. Your closest neighbor is the one you sleep with.
Hmm.
There's nobody closer. And if you sleep in
Right.
different beds, to get together, it's okay. It's still your closest neighbor, whatever. So we cannot neglect that first
Yeah.
relationship here on earth. I mean, we see it all the time with like kids, like when people, especially normally it's the mom who with the kids, you have that bond with them as they're growing and stuff, and that
Hmm.
bond doesn't separate or mature as the kids get older. So we're putting the kids in front of our spouse. With guys, it's work normally, or and they're like, oh, if I can just get this money, if I can just get this promotion, if we get a bigger house, then we can go to Disney World, we can get a new car, and we just keep putting those things
Right. It's
in
things
there,
that pop in. Yeah.
and that's the problem. I mean, God makes it really clear. It's God, spouse. That's it. That
And regardless of how your spouse is doing, you are one, but you are still accountable for your actions.
absolutely.
You are still going to be accountable at the end. There is not going to be, just like you've said, Adam has blamed it on Eve, but she gave me this. There is not, and whether we're talking headship or that,
Hmm.
there is not still going to be a day where you are not going to come before God and still account for your actions, which include loving your spouse well through it all.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's a huge one, And I think like sometimes we use that as like the scapegoat. Well, they're just unlovable. They're not a believer. They want to go. They want to go out. They want to be with their friends. They don't come home. They do this and that. It all sucks. I get it, but you still love them. You make that choice every day, and that's it. A lot of people want love to be a feeling, which there's a little feeling there, good and bad, but it's an action. It's what we get up and choose to do every day. It's what when reality slaps us in the face, we still choose to do.
And I think that there are two things that you had me think of something. Like there's the spouses that don't want to work at the marriage, that are going out,
Mm-hmm.
that are not there, that are not present. I think that is obviously more in line with what we talked about, like the abuse, things like
Yeah,
that. Because when someone's visibly leaving the
yeah,
marriage, visibly walking away, you can still pray for them, you can still love them, but that doesn't mean that you also accept that behavior in your day to day every single day. If someone's
mm-hmm.
coming home drunk every morning in front of your kids, you still have to put boundaries up.
Yeah. And you said to begin with when we talked about that, it doesn't have to be a forever boundary, but you
Yeah.
do need to put up a boundary for your safety, for your kids' safety, for things like that. And it's not always the guy; it's the girl sometimes,
Sure. Oh,
whatever it may
absolutely.
be.
I didn't. Yeah.
But you need to put up those boundaries. Don't quit praying for them. Keep
No.
helping
And
them.
don't quit
Get them
loving
help. Go to
them
counseling.
if
Do
you
those
can.
different things. Don't stop loving them.
Yes.
And that's that old adage that it's hate the sin, not the sinner. You know what I mean? And it is. Like we all make mistakes. We all do stupid things, and from time to time, the degree of the stupidity or what happens is more than the other. But in the end, my mistake is no worse than your mistake, and your mistake is no worse than
Hmm.
my mistake. Now, obviously, there are laws, there are things like that, and there's degrees of everything. But when God looks down on you and sees it, you know what?
We're all guilty.
He sees Kevin as guilty, and he sees Kristen as guilty,
Right.
and that's in his eyes.
Yes. But I do think that the majority of it is more of these day to day. How do I get him to do this? How do I get him to open up to me? How do I get him to fill
Yeah,
in the blank?
yeah, and I
Um,
mean that's that it is. And I'll tell you as a guy, and I have told you this many times in our
I know what
marriage.
you're going to say.
If you nag me, I don't care what it is. I truly do not care what it is. If you won't leave it alone, if you keep bringing it up like time and time again, I'm not going to do it
But that's you and your
just to prove just
stubbornness.
because I
That
won't
isn't
do it.
everyone.
I would say that's guys. I mean, there
I
comes a
hear
point.
you,
There
but
comes a point where you just have to say, and it might be something very stupid, like put the toilet seat down.
take out the
That's one
garbage.
we've never had. But yeah, but like something really stupid, the cap on the tooth, whatever it may be. Listen, if you have said it to me 20
Do we
times,
have something like that?
Do we have something like that?
Yeah, that I nag you about and you won't do. Is there something stupid like that?
I don't.
I can think of things that you nag me about and I don't do.
Oh yeah, I can too. Um,
Because I'm so
I don't think
pleasant.
it's
I don't complain to
nagging,
you about
but I
anything.
I do when it happens. I do say it,
I'm just a
but I
happy
don't
person.
go on with it. I don't. I think we have. I think I have changed in so many ways that you have
I have
nothing.
let go all
You
those
just have
little annoying
nothing
things.
for me.
I'm a
I
very
can't think of
patient
anything. But I will say this, and
person.
I know Kristen will say this as well. Um, and I own it. You know, if God can change me, He can change anyone. And
Yeah, but he does that with all of us, and we're all crappy. So
I agree.
it's not just you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I love you.
That's one of the nicest things you ever said.
Oh, wow. Okay, well then let's end it on that because I don't think I'm gonna get better.
You don't think so?
No.
Well, I will say, like, if you are on either side of that, if you are the one who feels you can do nothing right, if you're the one that feels like your spouse is just against you,
Yeah.
don't give up.
Yeah.
Keep doing what you're doing. Do the 1 degree changes.
And if you don't see the 1 degree changes and you feel like everybody thinks he's great and he's really not that great, and if only, like, let that go, give it to God,
Absolutely.
and
Give it
just
to
take care of
God.
you
Worry about
because you could drive yourself crazy.
Love them well.
Love them well.
Because part of loving them well is knowing what to say and what not to say, and knowing when to say it and when not to say it. So I think that's
We're
a
all
big
not
one.
great at that, but
No, we're not. But
we
give it
can
to God.
try.
Yeah, give it to God. Seriously, if you're in doubt, give it to God. Doesn't matter which side you're on. Just
Give pause.
give it to God. Yeah.
Take a pause and give it to
Pause
God.
before you speak. Give it to God. He'll give you different words. I promise you, He will. He does it to me. Like, there'll be something in my mind. If I give it to Him, if I just give it that little bit of time, either one, I don't say anything, or two, what I say, it's not my words because mine were not that nice. So do it. Give it to God. Give it all to God. Next week, I don't know who we'll have
TBD.
or what we're doing yet. So we will cross that bridge next week. We do have a marriage retreat.
Yes.
Next week.
We will have
January
lots to talk about.
31st through February 2nd. It's our vision retreat where we talk.
So exciting.
Try to get on the same page for the year.
We'll be going out into a secluded house.
Yes.
And the house might not be in a secluded area, but the couples will be secluded in the house.
Absolutely.
To work on
absolutely.
their year.
Yeah, you get some time with us where we kind of guide you. There's a book that you go through. We also have fun time, game time, talk time, all that kind of stuff. Lots of food. But we do have spot for one more couple. If anyone's interested, reach out to us. Email us, kevin@marriageandthebuff.com. We'll get you all the information. It is January 31st through February 2nd.
So coming up.
And then the really cool thing's not too far off. At our church, we're doing a marriage conference.
Yeah, we can.
That will be March 14th and 15th. We'll talk more about that. But that's going to be a lot of fun. I know one thing that we thought about talking about this week was the importance of things like that. Like, you need to, at least once a year,
putting the extras in.
Just put that extra in, whether it be a marriage retreat, whether it may be a marriage conference. Like I said, we're doing one here. Family Life has Weekend to Remember all over the country. They do that. Crossroads down in Cincinnati, they do couples camp in late April. We go to that. That is amazing. You got 700 couples back in the woods, unplugged, doing life for the weekend. There are so many different things, but take the time to invest in your marriage at least once a year.
Because I think there's enough there.
Yes.
Like, there's a lot of great ideas. That'll be a fun topic.
Absolutely. But if you got any questions for us, reach out by email.
Send them in.
Send them in if you'd like to come talk with us or talk via the internet or whatever it may be. We can get you on. We'd love to talk to you. And that's about it, guys. Have a great week. Stay warm. Cuddle up. We love you guys. Bye.